A cold-hearted man falls for love at first sight. Wild West Tales. The sun was low in the sky, spreading a dull orange light across the dry land. Dust moved slowly with the wind, and the sound of hooves echoed on the empty road. A lone rider traveled across the wide plains of the Wild West. His name was Ezekiel Cross. People who knew him said he had no heart, not because he was cruel, but because he showed no feeling. He spoke very little, trusted no one, and never stayed in one place for long. Townsfolk often said that Ezekiel was like the desert, quiet, dry, and impossible to understand. Ezekiel rode into a small town called Silver Hollow, just as the evening began to settle. The town was simple, with wooden buildings, a few lanterns, and people moving slowly after a long day. It was not a place anyone would remember, but for Ezekiel, it was just another stop. He tied his horse near the general store and looked around. His eyes were sharp, always observing, but never showing interest. He had been to many towns before, and they all looked the same to him. Without saying a word, he walked into the store. The bell above the door rang softly as he entered. Inside, the store was warm and calm. Shelves were filled with supplies, flour, tools, cloth, and small items that people needed for daily life. Behind the counter stood a young woman. Her name was Eliza Mayfield. She was arranging some items carefully, her movements slow and gentle. When she heard the door, she looked up. Her eyes met Ezekiel's. For a brief moment, time seemed to pause. Eliza smiled, not a big or loud smile, but a soft one. It was the kind of smile that made people feel at ease. "Good evening," she said in a calm voice. Ezekiel did not answer right away. He was not used to people greeting him like that. Most people avoided him or spoke with fear, but Eliza's voice held no fear at all. He gave a small nod and stepped further inside. "I'm just looking," he said quietly. "Take your time," Eliza replied kindly, returning to her work. Ezekiel walked through the aisles slowly. He picked up a few items, looked at them, then put them back. But his attention kept drifting back to the counter, to her. He didn't understand why. There was nothing special about the moment. No loud event, no sudden change. And yet, something felt different. Ezekiel frowned slightly. He was not used to this feeling. After a while, he picked a small item, a packet of coffee, and walked to the counter. Eliza looked up again, her smile still there. "That'll be 2 coins, she said. Ezekiel placed the coins on the counter without speaking much. But as he turned to leave, Eliza spoke again. "You're new here," she said gently. Ezekiel paused. "I don't stay long anywhere," he replied. Eliza nodded, as if she understood. "Still, it's a quiet town. Not many travelers pass through." He looked at her for a moment. "That's a good thing." She smiled again. "Sometimes, quiet places need new faces." Ezekiel did not respond. He simply nodded and walked out of the store. But as he stepped outside, something stayed with him. Her voice, her calm presence. It followed him like a soft echo. That night, Ezekiel sat outside near the edge of town, staring at the dark sky. The stars were clear, shining bright above the empty land. Usually, this kind of night brought him peace. It reminded him of the life he chose, alone, free, and untouched. But tonight was different. His thoughts kept returning to the general store, to Eliza. He shook his head, trying to push the thoughts away. "It means nothing," he said to himself. And yet, deep inside, he knew something had changed. The next morning, the town woke slowly. People opened their shops, and the streets filled with quiet movement. Ezekiel had planned to leave early, as he always did. But he didn't. Instead, he found himself walking back toward the general store. He stopped outside, standing still for a moment. It was unlike him to hesitate. He always knew where he was going. But now, he wasn't so sure. After a few seconds, he stepped inside. The bell rang again. Eliza looked up, surprised, but pleased. "You're still here," she said. "For now," Ezekiel replied. This time, his voice was a little softer. He stayed longer that day. Not speaking much, not doing anything important. Just being there. And for the first time in many years, Ezekiel Cross, the man who felt nothing, began to feel something he could not explain. Something quiet. Something new. Something that might change everything. Part 2. A stranger to his own heart. The days in Silver Hollow passed slowly, but for Ezekiel Cross, something felt different now. He was still the same man on the outside, quiet, serious, and distant. He still spoke very little and kept to himself. But inside, something had begun to change, and he could not ignore it anymore. Every morning, he told himself he would leave the town, and every morning, he didn't. Instead, he found reasons to stay. Small reasons that didn't make sense even to him. Sometimes it was to buy supplies he didn't really need. Sometimes it was just to walk past the general store. And sometimes it was just to see Eliza. Eliza Mayfield noticed him too. At first, she thought he was just another traveler passing through. But as the days went by, she saw him more often. He would come into the store, stand quietly, look around, and leave after buying something small. He never caused trouble. He never spoke harshly. He was just quiet. One afternoon, the sun was bright and the town was calm. Eliza was arranging jars on a shelf when Ezekiel walked in again. "You're becoming a regular," she said with a gentle smile. Ezekiel paused, a little unsure. "Didn't plan to." "Sometimes plans change," Eliza replied. He didn't answer, but he stayed. That day, he watched her more closely, not in a strange way, but with quiet curiosity. She helped an old man carry a heavy bag without being asked. She listened patiently to a young boy who kept asking too many questions. She treated everyone with the same kindness. It confused Ezekiel. He had spent years believing that people looked out only for themselves. That kindness was rare and often fake. But Eliza was different, and that difference stayed in his mind. Later that evening, Ezekiel sat near the edge of town again, watching the sunset. The sky turned soft pink and orange, and the wind carried a cool breeze. He thought about leaving. He always left. That was his way. But now, the idea didn't feel as simple as before. "What am I doing here?" he asked himself quietly. He had no answer. The next day, something small but important happened. Ezekiel was walking past a fence near a small house when he noticed it was broken. A farmer stood nearby, looking worried. The wood had fallen, and part of the field was open. Normally, Ezekiel would walk past without stopping. But this time, he didn't. He stepped closer. "Need help?" he asked. The farmer looked surprised. "If you don't mind," he said. Without saying much more, Ezekiel began fixing the fence. His hands moved with skill and care. He worked quietly, not expecting anything in return. When he finished, the farmer thanked him with a smile. Ezekiel simply nodded and walked away. As he returned to town, something felt strange, not uncomfortable, but new. Helping someone like that, it felt different. Later, when he entered the general store, Eliza noticed something right away. "You look different today," she said. Ezekiel frowned slightly. "Different how?" "I don't know," she said softly. "Just lighter, maybe." He didn't understand her words, but he didn't argue either. "I fixed a fence," he said after a moment. Eliza smiled. "That was kind of you?" Kind. It was not a word anyone had used for him before. Ezekiel looked away, unsure how to respond. Days continued to pass, and these small moments kept growing. He helped someone find a lost item. He gave directions to a traveler. He even spoke a little more than usual. Each time, he felt that same strange feeling, and each time, he thought of Eliza. One evening, as the sun was setting, Eliza stepped outside the store and saw Ezekiel standing nearby. "You don't seem like the kind of man who stays in one place," she said. "I'm not," he replied. "Then why are you still here?" Ezekiel was silent for a long moment. He didn't have the words. Or maybe he wasn't ready to say them. "I don't know," he finally answered. Eliza looked at him, not with judgment, but with understanding. Sometimes we don't need to know right away. Her words stayed with him. That night, Ezekiel lay under the open sky again. The stars were bright, just like before. But he was not the same. For the first time in his life, he felt like a stranger. Not to the world, but to himself. He didn't understand his own heart anymore. And deep inside, a quiet question began to grow. Was this place changing him? Or was it her? Part 3. The Battle Within. The wind moved softly across Silver Hollow, carrying dust through the quiet streets. Life in the town went on as usual, but for Ezekiel Cross, nothing felt the same anymore. He still woke early. He still sat alone at times. He still spoke less than others. But inside, there was a storm. Ezekiel had never questioned himself before. His life had always been simple. Ride, stop, leave. No attachments, no feelings, no confusion. Now everything felt uncertain. and the reason was clear. Eliza. Every time he saw her, his thoughts became restless. Her voice stayed in his mind. Her kindness made him think about things he had never cared about before. He didn't like it, not because it was bad, but because he didn't understand it. One afternoon, Ezekiel stood near the water well, watching people go about their day. Children laughed, neighbors talked, and the town felt alive. He noticed how easily people connected with each other. It was something he had never been part of. "You've been standing there a while," a voice said behind him. He turned. It was Eliza. She walked toward him with her usual calm expression. "Thinking about something?" she asked. Ezekiel looked away for a moment. "Just watching." Eliza stood beside him, looking at the same view. "It's a small town," she said, "but people care about each other." Ezekiel nodded slowly. "That's rare." Eliza glanced at him. "Not always. Sometimes people just need a reason." Her words made him quiet again. A reason. He wasn't sure he had one. Later that day, Ezekiel found himself helping again, this time guiding a lost traveler who had taken the wrong road. It was a simple act, but something about it felt important. As the traveler thanked him and walked away, Ezekiel stood still. A thought came to him. He was changing, not in big, loud ways, but in small, steady steps, and it scared him. That evening, he returned to the general store. Eliza was closing up, placing items in order and lighting a lantern. "You're here late," she said with a soft smile. "So are you," Ezekiel replied. She laughed lightly. "Someone has to close the shop." Ezekiel stepped closer, resting his hand lightly on the counter. "You do a lot for this town." Eliza shrugged gently. "It's all I've known." There was a short silence. Then she added, "But I don't think I'll stay here forever." Ezekiel looked at her. "What do you mean?" he asked. Eliza's eyes softened as she spoke. "I've always wanted to leave someday. Maybe find a bigger place. Start something new. Somewhere with more chances." Her words were calm, but they carried a quiet dream. Ezekiel felt something strange in his chest. Tight. Uncomfortable. "You want to leave Silver Hollow?" he asked. "Not today," she said. "But someday, yes." Ezekiel didn't reply. The idea of her leaving, it stayed heavy in his mind. For a man who had always been the one to leave first, this feeling was new. He stepped back slightly. "That makes sense," he said quietly. But inside, nothing made sense. That night, Ezekiel didn't sleep. He sat near the edge of town again, staring into the distance. The sky was dark, and the wind had grown colder. His thoughts were louder than ever. He tried to tell himself the truth he had always believed. "This isn't your place. You don't belong here. Just leave." But another voice, softer but stronger, spoke back. "Then why do you want to stay?" Ezekiel closed his eyes. He didn't have the answer. The next morning, he saddled his horse. For a moment, it felt like the old days again. The simple life. No questions, no feelings. He held the reins tightly. This was what he knew, what he understood. But as he prepared to ride out, his eyes moved toward the town, toward the general store, toward her. He stood there for a long time. His heart felt heavy, like it was pulling him in two different directions. One path was familiar, safe, empty, and quiet. The other was uncertain, full of risk, but also something else. Something real. Ezekiel took a slow breath. For the first time in his life, he was not running from danger. He was running from a feeling, and deep down, he knew. He didn't want to run anymore. But staying meant something he had never done before. It meant opening his heart. And that was the hardest battle he had ever faced. Part 4. A New Kind of Courage. The morning air in Silver Hollow was calm and cool. The sun had just begun to rise, spreading soft golden light across the quiet town. People were slowly waking up, opening their shops, starting another simple day. But for Ezekiel Cross, this day felt different. He stood beside his horse at the edge of town, holding the reins tightly in his hand. His bag was ready. Everything was the same as before. This was the moment he always chose, the moment he left. For years, he had followed this same path. No questions, no hesitation. Just ride away and never look back. But today, he couldn't move. His eyes drifted toward the town, toward the small general store, toward Eliza. A quiet struggle filled his chest. His mind told him to leave. It was easier that way. Safer. No confusion, no risk. But his heart, it was asking him to stay. Ezekiel took a deep breath. For the first time in his life, he felt afraid. Not of danger, not of the unknown land, but of what he truly felt inside. He closed his eyes for a moment. Then, slowly, he let go of the reins. His horse stood still as Ezekiel turned back toward the town. Step by step, he walked forward. Each step felt heavy, but also right. When he reached the general store, the door was still closed. The town was just waking up. He stood there quietly, unsure of what to say, unsure of what would happen next. After a few moments, the door opened. Eliza stepped outside, holding a small box. She stopped when she saw him. "You're still here," she said softly, a hint of surprise in her voice. Ezekiel nodded. "I was leaving," he said. Eliza looked at him, waiting. "But I didn't," he added. There was a short silence between them. The morning light fell gently across the street, and the world seemed to pause once again. Ezekiel struggled to find the right words. He had never been good with speaking, especially about things that mattered. "I don't understand this," he said honestly. "I've always been alone. It was simple, easy." Eliza listened quietly. "But now, things feel different," he continued. "And I don't know what to do with that." Eliza stepped a little closer, her expression calm and kind. "You don't have to understand everything right away," she said gently. "Some things take time." Ezekiel looked at her, his eyes softer than they had ever been. "I thought I had no place anywhere," he said. "But when I'm here, it doesn't feel that way." Eliza smiled, not surprised, just warm. "Maybe you just needed the right place," she said. Ezekiel shook his head slightly. "It's not just the place." He paused. "It's you." The words were simple, but they carried everything he had been holding inside. Eliza's smile faded into a quiet, thoughtful look. Not sadness, not fear, just understanding. Ezekiel continued, his voice low but steady. "I don't know what this is. I've never felt it before. But I know one thing." He took a small step forward. "I don't want to leave." The wind moved softly through the street, carrying the moment with it. Eliza looked at him carefully. "I told you before," she said. "I might leave this town someday." Ezekiel nodded. "I remember." "That hasn't changed?" she added. Ezekiel took a breath. "Then maybe I don't need it to." Eliza looked slightly surprised. "I've spent my whole life running," Ezekiel said. "Maybe it's time I stop. Not because I have all the answers, but because I want to try." "Try what?" Eliza asked softly. "To stay," he said. "To be part of something. To not be alone." Eliza's eyes softened again. "And if I leave one day?" she asked. Ezekiel thought for a moment. "Then I won't run from that either," he replied. "I'll face it, like I'm trying to do now." There was a quiet pause. Then Eliza smiled. Not just her usual gentle smile, but something deeper. "You've changed," she said. Ezekiel gave a small nod. "I think I have." She looked at him for a long moment, then stepped closer. "Staying takes more courage than leaving sometimes," she said. Ezekiel almost smiled. "I'm starting to understand that." The sun rose higher, lighting up the town of Silver Hollow. People began moving around, unaware that something important had just happened. Ezekiel Cross, the man who once felt nothing, had chosen to stay. Not because it was easy, but because it mattered. And for the first time, he was not afraid of what came next. Because sometimes, the strongest man is not the one who rides away, but the one who decides to stay and feel. And in that quiet morning, a new journey began. Not across the land, but within the heart.